Insightful analysis, bold comments, friendly debates. Find all that and more on Roundtable, where passion meets in-depth discussion and covers the hottest topics in China.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Roundtable, coming to you live from Beijing. I'm your host, He Yang. I'm joined by Huang Shen and Carl Benjaminson. And can I just say, it's so great to see your lovely faces. And
it's been a while.
It's been a little while. Yes, I was away on a business trip, and also folks here are very busy with other assignments and stuff, so it's great to congregate in this studio again. A little stuffy as the air turns out to be, but lovely to see you guys.
It's good to have the gang back together.
Lovely. Yes. And good as always to have you, our dear listeners, with us. We have some fascinating topics for a discussion today and every day. On today's program, more and more cosmetic and skincare brands now have male celebrities to front their beauty campaigns. Why is it? And stats show a record rate of young Americans are living with parents. Gone are the days they leave the nest at 18. What's keeping them from moving on in life? You can find us on Apple Podcast at Roundtable China. Subscribe, rate, and review us. You can also send us an email or a voice question to ezfmroundtable@foxmail.com, as we'll have a heart-to-heart with you in our special segment on Roundtable. But first, on today's show, we often see female celebrities front beauty campaigns such as Kate Winslet for Lancome and Gong Li for L'Oreal. But increasingly, equally influential are the male celebrities who have become the face of advertisement campaigns and ambassadors for beauty brands. Before we talk about the situation now, where did all this start?
So this phenomenon actually started over 20 years ago when a Japanese superstar attentively stares at you, applying the lipstick on his tempting lips in a 1996 TV commercial. So does your heart skip a bit?
Yes.
For this commercial, I think, He Yang, you have more stories to tell us.
This is a little embarrassing to share, but I gotta say, and that superstar we're talking about, the multi-talented heartthrob.
Who is he?
Kimura Takuya, or Mucun Tuozai. I have to say, back then I was in primary school, but when I saw that advert, which was obviously not targeting my age group, it had an impact, I guess, for, women of all ages. And it was so forward in a way that, it's usually women that use lipstick, but when you see lipstick applied on the voluptuous lips of a man, and it had an impact. Apparently, it sold more than 3 million lipsticks and just completely sold out in Japan back then. And even till today, I still have that image in my face when this guy, he's like total eye candy, and with those captive eyes that's staring at you intensively as a woman's applying that lipstick on his lips. And then he says,
so there's a girl on the side to
but you can only see her hands.
So you could put your face in that girl's body, like saying, imagine that's you.
I mean, that is so sophisticated a kind of advertisement, because it says a lot, right? You get a lot of unsaid messages in all of that. So before I go on and on and on about this, Carl, it's time to stop me. So, I mean, would you get this kind of idea of advertisement?
Well, my big question in that example is, who was the guy? Was he like a glam rock singer, or like what was this a surprise for people, I suppose, is my question.
Oh, Carl Benjaminson. Back then it was like, I think for this superstar who was just becoming to the scene as sort of this wonder kid, and being known for his looks and also very good acting skills. So, but he was only 24 at the time, so people sort of knew him. But I think with this advertisement, it really solidified his superstar status, and also I think it showed the market that sometimes when you've got a guy selling female stuff, the customers actually really take the bite, or the bait, I mean. So kind of interesting phenomenon that started back then.
See, what was, I suppose, a surprise for me was that this has been going on for such a long time, because you often see stories of male live streamers who are quite popular and they're selling lipsticks and foundations and, you know, sunscreens and other beauty products for women. So it was, yeah, a surprise for me that this has been a very long-term phenomenon, because this doesn't happen in Australia, I have to say, at all.
But I think there might be a little bit of a difference, and actually, Huangshan, you would know this a bit better than I do. I just like to quickly state my knee-jerk reaction to what Carl, you just mentioned, because with the live streaming hosts that are selling lipstick, male live streaming hosts that are selling these female beauty products, they're usually sort of showing their expertise or shouting to you in an aggressive way, in my opinion. But some people, it's almost like, this such and such lipstick is amazing, get it now, otherwise you're crazy, that kind of thing. So apparently this kind of tactic works. So that's for the live stream thing. But for Kimura Takuya, man in the league of his own. Basically, what he did was, I think it's more sophisticated. It has something to do with his image, and also I think the female gaze as well. That is, but actually, you can argue it's a mixture. I can't really tell whether it's male or female gaze, in the sense that I think women are still projecting ourselves as if you were the woman, with him, kind of thing, like as the attractive woman that wants to be with him, or that he would see something special in you. But also the campaign's very aware of what's captivating for the female audience and really showcasing the attractiveness and the allure that this man has. So I mean, it's kind of complicated to describe or explain why it was such a big hit.
Because he is an extremely pretty man, but he's got quite soft feminine features.
See, that's interesting, because that comes from your more of a Western point of view.
That comes from my Western point of view. I think we can both agree that he's good looking, because the way your voice changes when you say his name shows that you still, you know, almost 30 years on, 25 years on, you know, find him a good-looking man. But like, he still looks manly.
Yeah.
But he's got femininity to him, I think, as well.
Yeah, but that might also explain like people's difference in view of masculinity and what's attractive between the East and West. There's certainly a kind of softness, I think, to his appearance, and also like the male celebrities in China, possibly. But yeah, so what's your opinion on all of this? And also, what is the latest development here in China when you see apparently guys are being employed to be fronting all these beauty campaigns? If I were a female celebrity, I wouldn't be very happy about this.
Yes, I think we've been talking for many times about like now all these cosmetic brands, they're trying to tap into the male cosmetic market, but at the same time, women are still the main force behind the purchasing power. I think like since 1996, it seems like an increasing number of male stars in other Asian countries, including China, like they're trying to be trying to have the endorsement of the cosmetic products. I think a very famous case was back in 2015. Do you know the Chinese actor? His name is Yang Yang. In that year, he was super popular, and he's renowned for his delicate like features, of course. And he became the first male star to appear in ads for Guerlain and lipsticks, and in Chinese mainland. I remember on that time, when my friend asked me to buy the lipstick for her, she just told me, "Oh, can you buy the Yang Yang's like color number that lipstick for me?" And I went to the shop, and they said, "Oh, sorry, this color has been sold out. So you need to like sometimes maybe you travel abroad, you can buy this color because no one knows like who is the person like speaks for this like a special color number. But this has gradually become a phenomenon in China. And we think about this year during the past summer, and there are 3 super hot like actors in China, very influential, who is like Xiao Zhan, Wang Yibo, and Li Xian. All these 3 guys, they have their endorsement for some beauty products like lipsticks or skincare products. It seems like now more and more brands, they want to use male celebrities to speak for them because it's easy to understand. We can see that international, not only cosmetic brands, but also luxury brands, they gradually acknowledge or embrace the power of Chinese male celebrities reached in terms of the sales. They can materialize their fan base into the concrete figures of the sales. And it seems like now, because the female fans for male celebrities are more loyal, so it's a very, it's more like a shortcut to get a huge fan base for your brand thanks to those male celebrities.
See, I find it a really interesting marketing strategy, though, because, again, from like sort of Australian perspective, I suppose, looking at this, you can understand cosmetics because men are paying more attention to how they look. They are using beauty products. You could argue that there might be some crossover. It's not too much of a stretch to have a man who's wearing makeup. But then we've got these examples. So in 2012, South Korean actor So Jin-sub, apologies for the mispronunciation, he was advertising bras for the lingerie brand Vivian, and the Taiwanese actor Bo Lin Chen, he was selling sanitary napkins. Like that's the perfect definition of a non-male crossover product.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, with the employment of so many of these male celebrities, they are certainly adding another layer of something that's trying to capture the audience or the consumer. So, but this is still a relatively regional circumstance, so to speak, I suppose, because Carl, you mentioned that there is not something like this you would see in Australia or possibly for some of the other more Western brands. Why do you think is that?
I think there's just a very different concept of what's considered masculine. And it's not that, in the past, in the 80s and 90s, we had things like glam rock. We had men dressing up in camp, over-the-top costumes and wearing makeup. But it's still, I think, quite fundamentally different. I don't think it's as easy for men, again, speaking particularly for Australia, to come across as feminized. I think that's still looked down on compared to what you have in China.
But this is really different, actually, because essentially what you're saying here is who is the customer base?
Yeah.
Because what your line of thinking seems to be targeting that it would be possibly men that are buying the cosmetics, but
here is still the female customers.
See, that's interesting because it's 2 separate consumer bases.
But I think that we can look, using the early example, you've got a beautiful-looking Japanese man who's quite stylish and he's got a natural beauty that comes out. I think you can hear a message from him saying, this is a beautiful cosmetic product. If you've got some Australian rock bogan, g'day mate, try this lipstick. It's awesome. Who cares what they think about lipstick or bras or tampons? Then it's too much of a cognitive stretch, I think, for people to look at how they present themselves and think they have anything in any vague way related to this product. So I just don't think it works as a marketing strategy in Australia and the way a lot of male stars are presented.
Very interesting. This would actually remind me of, this is really difficult to find some of the Western examples, but one comes to mind would be a few years ago, Brad Pitt. He was endorsing one of the perfumes for Chanel, and it was quite rare to have a man advertising for perfume that's created for women. It's not cologne for men. So I suppose there is something of a twist there that is trying to appeal to the female market with the attractiveness of a man that is almost like if you like this man and this man likes this product, then it almost makes sense that if you like the product as well. Is that like a similar line of thinking? But I agree with you, Carl. This is used far less as a marketing strategy as we can see in examples from some of those brands. Yeah.
I think now it's also like corresponding to the phenomenon of the fans community and the fans culture in Asia. So we can see this phenomenon is extremely popular in East Asia, like in China, in Japan, in South Korea, because here we have a really strong like fan base, and more the female customers, they have demonstrate the very strong villainies and purchasing power and spend on their idols and buy products they endorse. And I feel like for me, in the past like 2 or 3 years, you could see there's some super popular female celebrities like being the ambassador of those cosmetic brands. It was a trend, but I think since like last year, the trend is starting to change, because I think maybe for most girls, we can say many girls are just, for me, maybe example, I think I'm just average looking, and you look those super glamorous, like hot, like celebrities, you want to be as glamorous as them. But then you realize it's hard for me to be like this, because first you need to lose like 20 pounds, and you need to like have like the facial mask every day, then you can be as gorgeous as them. Then you may think it's a competition. But if you have a male celebrities, there's no competition, and you like this idol, and some girls have some brands they preferred, and you could buy, for example, you can buy a products from maybe Dior or Lancome or other brands. But if your idol is the ambassador of a certain brand, then you see, why not I just buy all my products from this brand?
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think, Carl? Would you buy, let's say, a brand that's endorsed by one of your favorite celebrities, possibly a female? I mean, does it work the other way around?
It might. I'm not particularly swayed by celebrity endorsements because, for the most part, they're paid. Occasionally, if you get a celebrity come out and saying, I really like this product and I'm not being paid for it, then I might pay more attention. But otherwise, they're just a walking advertisement.
Yeah.
But I can understand your argument. So I was thinking about a case, I think it was earlier this year, of a Chinese model who was photographed without foundation on, and you can see her freckles, and there was this incredible, just disgusting backlash against her, and for looking so ugly because she had a couple of freckles. And you think, if the standard for beauty being presented in fashion is so high here, does it reach a point where it's unattainable? So it's better to present a different image and sell it on that basis.
Yeah, and also sometimes like the brands are more harsh to female celebrities, because whenever female celebrities found some like into some gossips or some scandals, then their business value will drop significantly. But usually the male people are more inclusive or more generous to male celebrities. Usually, if, for example, they have some scandals in life, it won't influence their business value that much. For example, for a time, Yang Mi, the actress, she was like the sweetheart of all the brands, because people love to see her street snaps. And then later, like after she was revealed that she was divorced, then very few like brands still like to use her as endorsement.
Well, I mean, if this were true, then it shows the deep embedded in gender inequality that still prevails, I suppose, in certain parts of the business world and elsewhere, so to speak. But actually, I would kind of disagree with you, Huang Shen, a bit here, that I still think that even for male celebrities, I mean, it depends on what kind of scandal it is. If it's fundamentally detrimental to your image, let's say you were selling the public image of being a family man, a dad, and then you're found out having an affair with some woman, then yeah, you will have very little value to your brand soon afterwards. And I don't need to name some examples there. So I think it depends on what is really the sore spot. And if, well, that happens, then it's no good for your public image, and it translates to the values that you obtain as well. But also, despite the fact that if we revisit the origin story, it could be Kimura Takuya in 1996, there was a relative gap in time until this was suddenly a trend again, which was possibly 2015 in China, as we saw gradually more and more of these male celebrities taken over, even in beauty campaigns. And do you think this is something to do with the Chinese consumers' change and social change and other reasons that are also happening?
I think it's more like kill like two birds with one stone, because if you use a male celebrity from one like point, like you can attract more female customers who is like significantly want to pay for their idols, and secondly you can attract more male customers, because like I think now the female cosmetic industry has already been saturated. There's no much like space for an expansion, so now more and more brands, they are targeting at male customers. Like they started with the skincare products, and then earlier we talked about more men are willing to try some cosmetics, like for example the lipsticks maybe and BB cream, and those some like can give you a subtle makeover of your appearance. So I think in this way it means like they at the same time they want to attract more and more male customers, because you use maybe your a girl's favorite like a male image, then you make the guy think, oh, if I use this product I could be as good looking as this guy on the poster, and then I can attract more girls. Why not?
Do you think this is something to do with the influence of K-pop in not only just in the East Asian area, but also around the world?
Yes, because you can see for many like K-pop stars, usually they wear very heavy eyeliners and the foundation.
Eyeliners.
Yeah, it seems like a foundation is their basic skincare products like for every day. So if you go to South Korea in Seoul, you could see the guys there's no flaws on their skin because they use foundation, and maybe their procedures of skincare is more than you do as a girl.
That's so much pressure. I mean, I feel the pressure as a woman I don't think I attract those guys in the first place, but anyhow, just throw it out there. If I'm with a guy like that, I would feel like possibly I need to wear makeup every day when I'm actually more comfortable, going makeup free. But also, I mean, that's a bit of a paradox because it wouldn't happen. But Carl, what do you think? I mean, do you think this is I guess just something that that would happen elsewhere?
I think it's all K-pop's fault, to be honest. Like, they are extremely good-looking men, the K-pop singers, and I think
thanks to makeup and stuff.
Yeah, but I think it has spread beyond just K-pop, though, across more of South Korean society. Like, there is huge It's no surprise that a country that has, such an incredibly high rate of plastic surgery is also embracing makeup on both men and women, and the importance of looking good. Yeah. And I think as K-pop has spread, so has those fashion trends.
But also, I'm quite happy to see that there is still some sort of resistance in the minds of some people that you don't necessarily need to put on makeup all the time. And also, important distinction here, cosmetic products versus what's the other word? Skincare products. So cosmetics would mean more like makeup that's covering your face to make you feel look better, supposedly, for that short time being. And skincare is like, just to improve your skin condition, and that is actually something I would recommend for maybe more people to do. Is just, who wants to age faster than what you already are going through. So that might help, but also there could be some discussion about the effectiveness of the beauty industry altogether, but that would be a discussion for a different day. And Carl, I absolutely agree with you. Despite the fact of all this talk about appearances, brands, and consumption, but ultimately, beauty is only within. And skin, what's the
Beauty is only skin deep.
Yes, but I still believe that what goes on in the heart is reflecting to what you look like. So, if that makes sense to you. And you're listening to Roundtable. Coming up next, we'll talk about a record high amount of Americans still living with their parents. Stick around, everybody. We'll be back after this break.
Informed opinion and heated debate. Find out what's got China talking and join us for your roundtable discussion.
You are listening to Roundtable with myself, He Yang, joined by Huang Shan and Carl Benjaminson. Coming up, stats show a record rate of young Americans are living with parents. Gone are the days they leave the nest at 18. What's keeping them from moving on in life? And also, what's the situation here in China? And should parents give kids pocket money? Are they better off, the kids better off, without dealing with the cash? Or is it really good education for them from a young age? And how do you do it right? If you're listening to our show on demand, you can find us at Roundtable China on Apple Podcast, and 2 apps where you can check us out. That's the Qingsong Tiaopin app and China Plus app. And now on Roundtable as we continue our discussion. A decade later, after the financial crisis, young American adults are living with parents at record high rates. Soaring housing costs are forcing millennials and now Generation Z adults to hold off getting their own space or place. So let's take a look at the details of the news report about this age cohort between the 18 and 34-year-old Americans not getting their own place.
So apparently for 40% of young Americans, so again that's the 18 to 34 age bracket, according to the Census Bureau, is they're living without a spouse in their parents' home. According to an analysis of Census Bureau data, roughly 37% of Californians between 18 and 34 live with their parents. So that's a huge number. In the expensive part of Orange County, although Orange County's not exactly cheap anywhere, just over half, so 55% of 18 to 34-year-olds live with a parent, one of the highest rates of it in the state. Mm-hmm. So this is a huge change from decades past.
Yeah, well, how would you see it, though, if you are, let's say, a 30-something-year-old, and when you introduce yourself in a date or just meeting someone, and where do you live? Oh, I live with mom and dad. How would this person be perceived in the English-speaking context?
I think, look, when I was much younger, you'd be perceived as being a bit strange if you were still living with mum and dad even in your late 20s. But I think it's less of a surprise now. So according to a recent survey in Australia, 56% of men aged 18 to 29 are living with their parents. That's up from 47% in, in 2001. 35%, 55%, I think, of women are living with their parents as well, up from about 1/3 in 2001. So I think nowadays, if someone said, I'm in my 20s and living at home, it wouldn't be that much of a surprise anymore.
Mm-hmm. So let's venture into the realm of finding some answers. Why do you think this is happening?
I think this might be multiple reasons. For example, it's the stagnant salaries, student debt, and rapidly soaring rents. Because I think very different from Chinese students, for most American students, they have to pay for their tuition fee by themselves. And afterwards, when they just become a newcomer, like in the job markets, they need to pay back their tuition fees, like, because usually they get loans from the school. And if at the same time you don't have a very decent salary and you have to pay back your loans, and at the same time the housing price is increasing, it's hard for you to afford a own place by yourself. Maybe the most convenient method is to stay with your parents, because I think it's very different from China. In our situation, it's a norm, or it's very normal here. Before, I think for most like people like me, before you get married, usually you just stay with your parents, and if you work in the same city with your parents, and sometimes you only have your own place if you work in a different city. So for Chinese people, we don't think it's a big thing, but based on my understanding of America, or all the like American TV shows or the movies I watched before, it's a big thing, because I think based on Americans' value, it's very important to be independent, and they appreciate individualism. So if you still live with your parents after you're 18, maybe some people will treat you as a loser in life, because it's a time you need to grow up, you need to move out of your parents' shelter, and you need to stand on your own feet, and you have to have a place of your own. But I think maybe because the reality is not that like friendly to some students and new or fresh graduates, and in some big cities which everything's expensive, so maybe they have to like live with their parents to save some money and to get a foundation for their future own place.
And I think this is something that America and Australia and other parts of the world have been struggling with a little bit. People from older generations like to dump on millennials and younger people a bit for living at home and being more dependent on their parents, and they look back at the good old days when they moved out and they were independent and they bought their house, when they were quite young. But I think the reality is very different for a lot of young people. The days when you could graduate from high school, or even leave school at year 10, get yourself a good stable job and buy a house when you're in your early to mid-20s, that just doesn't exist anymore in Australia and America. Most people, the good news is they're staying at school longer, they're finishing high school, more and more people are going to university. That means the time when they can start full-time work has been pushed back. Mm-hmm. But yeah, if you've got higher house prices, less stable, casualized employment, so you don't know month to month if you're going to have your job, that means you can't necessarily... Well, you certainly can't get a mortgage. You can't necessarily pay rent if you're that financially insecure, and you've got high student loans. I think for most people, staying at home now makes a lot of sense. And the idea of saving up to buy a house is something that you do in your 20s or even early 30s. I think a lot of younger people are giving up on that, and not unreasonably. It's not a goal within most people's reach now.
That's so interesting, because you're saying that a lot of the factors that used to be consonant, that now it's all changed. And without taking those changing factors into consideration, then it would be really a false analysis of the situation. I agree with you that the millennials are getting a lot of flack for a change in lifestyle, or this kind of arrangement, I suppose, to the previous generation. And there's all this talk about now people are possibly earning less than they used to in the US. And this is to give you a little bit of perspective, millennials, if they are compared with those of the Generation X that's born between the 1960s and late 1970s, and if they, according to Pew research, that the millennial households in 2014 earned a median income of more than $61,000. Bear that in mind, and compared with the inflation-adjusted $63,000 for Generation Xers in 1998, then you would arrive at the conclusion that now people are really earning less. And then that is strange because we see that technology has advanced, people are getting more education and all that, but it doesn't seem to be winning people the ideal life in that way. So there's got to be something of a deeper reason that has taken shape for us to see social phenomenon like this to happen.
And I think this is a problem for a lot of advanced Western countries, is that we've seen wage growth relatively flat for now an extended period of time, and we're seeing productivity not grow all that much. You know, we talk about all these great new technological advances we've got, but they're actually not making advanced economies that much more efficient. At the same time, things like housing prices are going up and the cost of education is going up. And real income is going down for a lot of people, like these, Gen X's or the millennial households. You know, real income is not keeping up with inflation. So this is a not something that can be solved overnight, but it's really a problem that's been developing over a couple of decades that means the economic life for people who are in the younger generations is going to be fundamentally different to what life was like for their parents or grandparents.
See, that's so interesting because we sort of, as someone who is part of the millennial generation that lives in China, and then we've seen, at least in our lifetime, that life seems to be going in the better direction. Like, I was born in a bungalow that our family we rented the place, and it was one room. And the toilet as well as the kitchen were outside, and it was shared with a few other families. But now, 20 plus years later, we have our own apartment that is rather spacious. So I think it's natural for parents to want their kids' generation to enjoy something that would be of a improvement or, at least of the similar standard. And if not, that can be panned out for people, then that shows that, well, it's going to manifest in other ways in society too, and not always a positive one.
I think this is more like a universal problem because even now, if we compare our salaries with our parents' generations when they were in their 20s or 30s, it seems like the number is 10 times or 20 times higher. But at the same time, everything is more expensive, like the commodity prices or the prices for your daily expenses, they're also 20 or 40 times higher than before. And I think for my parents' generation, I was so surprised like how they could do with their hardworking and to buy a really nice house and on their own. But for our generation, it's a little bit hard. But maybe for an average person like me, but there are some really extraordinary people, they can afford their house by themselves. But for me, I think without my parents' help, I couldn't buy a house in the first-tier cities.
Yeah, and you're not alone. I think most of people of our generation would share the same sentiment. It's almost like you would be super lucky if that rigid demand appeared at the right time in history. That is, if you were born in the 1970s or the early part of the 1980s, and then you reach that age of getting married and needing your own place at the right time when housing price wasn't that high. And if you managed to purchase or at least put down the down payment and it wasn't that difficult back then you're the really lucky one. But then if you miss that opportunity in history, and then it would be a huge difference. And this is really interesting as we see it's sort of showing this kind of sign in different places of the world, and social change happens accordingly. Because let's say if you're back to the US and then you belong to this age group and you're still living with mom and dad, return to the nest after getting your college degree or possibly a master's degree, and how is life gonna continue after that? I mean, what about finding a partner, or what about dating when mom and dad are living under the same roof? would people's lives be just completely changed as a result?
Well, I think this is one of the interesting things to watch over the coming decade, to see how people's lives do change. Like when I was 16, I got my first part-time job. I was able to move out from my parents the year after I finished high school. And, I lived independently. If I wanted to get laid, I could bring someone over because I wasn't living with my parents. But, if you've got mum and
Thank you for your candor.
but if you've got mum and dad there, it makes it really awkward for people. And I think about, here, so in China, a lot of students who go to university, they live in university dorms.
Oh,
with a couple
the good
of
people, the good people, staying celibate.
Yeah, and then you end up staying celibate and desperate and dateless until you're in your mid-20s because you've been living at university. Then you move back in with mum and dad. So that does add pressure to people's lives because they don't have the same space. They don't have the same freedoms that they did to go out and date and have fun and meet people and just spend most of their time socializing with people outside of their family, which is really important if you want to become a normal, well-developed, healthy person who can go out into the workplace and make friendships and start a family of your own. You need to leave the nest.
Yeah, but also we're talking about, having that in mind, but you have the option of renting or, putting down the seed money or the down payment of one day owning your own place. But now people are, just saving up on all of that. Sort of is it almost like they're forced to be driven back into the nest? And if that's the case, then that shows there's something not acceptable in the arrangement and the distribution of social resources, possibly, or maybe this is more of a one school of thought, so to speak.
Well, I think that is, you've kind of hit the nail on the head there. So if you look at the cost of housing and other assets in China, in Australia, in America, it's really, really, really high. And a consequence of that is that people can't afford to buy a house until later, so they have to live at home. We've seen drastically rising inequality in all three places, and this is one of the consequences of that. So I think as a society, there does have to be that ongoing discussion about, okay, well, if we're going to make housing an asset rather than, I think Xi Jinping has said, a house is something to live in, not something to speculate over, and I think it's incredibly important, and it's something that a lot of people in China, Australia, and American and British economy have forgotten. This decision has consequences. If we make housing an investment rather than a place for people to live, it has all of these knock-on social effects, like people living at home, not being able to start a family early as they might.
And also, I think for Western, young people, they prefer renting a house than buying a house. I think buying a house is a very deep-rooted mindset for Chinese people, because as long as you want to settle down in a city, then you want to buy a house of your own, then you feel like you have more security. But at the same time, I think sometimes it's good to move out of your parents' house, because even for being a Chinese person myself, I cherish my value of family and love my parents, but sometimes after you've grown up, you still want some space of your own. And sometimes we say a certain distance can create a sense of beauty, because if you live under the same roof with your parents every day, there must be some troubles, and you have different mindset, different values, and there must be some conflicts. And also at the same time, if you have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and then you can't only hang out with them as an outdoor venue. Sometimes you may just want to sit in a sofa, watch a really cozy film, and cook some food. Then you can do it because your parents is next door. Then it's a little bit awkward.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. And certainly that is part of the grievance of young people in a lot of places, including Hong Kong. I think, it's not a secret that the housing price in that city is one of the most expensive in the world. So for the younger generation who arrived late on this property train and just looking at, your whole lifetime savings, could not even afford more than a living room or just the bedroom of that dream property, which isn't even that big to start with, then that is hugely off-putting. And this is definitely one of the basic needs and demands that I think all governments possibly are doing the calculation and want to come up with a good social policy that can address the issue. But very interesting as we see this seems to be also part of urbanization and the development of cities, and also what kind of social and economic policy does a government want to employ when it comes to, well, this very real situation that so many of us are dealing with. So possibly in the future, maybe people wouldn't just turn an eye when they hear that, oh, you're 30, 40 something year old and still sharing a place with mom and dad.
That's a really depressing thought. I'm sorry. That's a really, really sad thought. And
Really?
I hope society doesn't go that way.
Yeah. And Huangshan, you make a very good point that if you're living under the roof that's owned by mom and dad, you better be accommodating to the landlords, right? And if your parents are your landlord, there are a lot of sacrifices one need to make in order for you to stay in that situation. So, yeah, food of thought, and let us know what you think. And you can always send us an email to ezfmroundtable@foxmail.com. Yes, you're listening to Roundtable. Coming up next, allowances can teach children financial skills, but they require effort from parents. How can you get it right? Stay with us to find out more on it.
Looking for passion? How about fiery debate? Want to hear about current events in China from different perspectives? Then tune in to Roundtable, where East meets West and understanding is the goal.
It's the Hour of Roundtable with myself, He Yang, Huangshan, and Carl Benjaminson in the studio. Allowances can teach children financial skills, but they require certainly a lot of effort from parents to get it right. Well, the concept of an allowance is pretty simple. You give your kids a set of amount of cash every week or month, sometimes in exchange for completing certain tasks or chores, and your children can learn to budget, save, and value money. But this decision to give an allowance to your kids isn't always an easy one. Well, is it common to, well, we don't have kids right now, but, you know, if you go down memory lane, when you were a kid, did you receive pocket money or allowance?
Of course. When I was in high school, because in my high school we have canteen, and also you have the restaurant in those shopping malls, so you can make your own decision whether you want to eat in school or in a shopping mall. So my parents have to give me some pocket money or put in this trendy way the allowances and to support my living for the whole week. So I think it's a pretty good idea, because from a very young age you started to have the concept of how to arrange your money. For example, if you want to appreciate some better food, maybe you have to starve yourself in a canteen for 1 or 2 days, and then use the pocket money to have a more fancy food in the shopping mall. And also at the same time, you know that you have a list of the things you want to buy, but your financial resources is very limited. Then you, from a very young age, I started to know if you want to obtain something, you have to give up something that is, less interested in. You're less interested in. So from a young age, I know, have this mind in. I keep this in mind. Sometimes you need to give up something to get the things you really want.
Well, that's a very interesting story from Huangshan. What about you, Carl Benjaminson? Did you have pocket money?
I had pocket money when I was very young, and I think it's pretty normal in Australia, and a lot of schools used to have, their local bank would come in and they would set little bank accounts up for kids that they can put their allowance in, and they taught you how to save and how to calculate interest. And it's really about financial literacy from a very, very early age. That was just part of my experience growing up. I don't know if it's the same now for kids, but it was pretty common.
But was it a real bank account, from a real bank, or was it a
Yes.
make-up thing.
No, it wasn't a makeup bank. It was
For kiddos.
your parents help you sign up for it, but it was a real bank account. It was good for the banks because the bank account you have or the bank you bank with when you're young tends to be the one you'll stick with for most of your life.
Do you get a credit card?
No, you get a little pocketbook and a little piggy bank, and you go to the bank every once in a while and empty your piggy bank, and they'll give you a little statement, and they teach you how to be financially literate.
And how old were you?
That was in primary school.
Wow.
I can't remember how old I was, but it was before high school. It was quite early in primary school.
That is so interesting. Okay, so years later, I don't know how many, and you don't need to know either. Carl, how do you feel now about your financial literacy? Do you think that early education had long-lasting effects on how you manage money today?
Look, I think so. I'm not the most financially literate person around, but I think it was really useful. In the same way that I think my mum, when I was 16, she said to me, it's time for you to go out and get a job. It's time for you when you're 16 to get a job after school or on your weekends. Only for a few hours. It wasn't a huge amount of money, but that replaced pocket money. That was the money I spent buying movie tickets or buying food at the school canteen, or, because I was a bad kid, buying cigarettes. Like,
Don't do that, kids.
Don't do that, kids. But the rest of it, it's important. And I think that was really useful for me because it made managing the money that I earned a lot easier. And I think working and earning your own money when you're younger, it really helps you appreciate the value of money when you have to really work for it in a basic part-time job.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Also, we've got some figures here that according to a study that came out this year in the U.S. That looked at more than 1,000 parents, 68% of the parents gave their kids pocket money. So let's say if this is going to be the family policy that you are going to deploy, then what is the better way of arrangement, so to speak? Because if you just give the money out and not monitor, I mean, it might not be a great lesson for kids in terms of financial literacy.
Well, I think that's the thing. If you dole out the money, every couple of days or every week, it's a little bit hard. But as, someone who has gone from, as an adult, being paid weekly to being paid monthly or less, once you start getting paid less often, you really quickly get forced to be responsible for your money. So I think if you give a kid a set amount of money at a regular interval of either a fortnight or a month, you say, look, if you run out of money, that's your problem. You obviously won't let them starve at the canteen, but it means they can't go and buy fun things that they like because they've spent the money that they had. And I think they will very quickly learn the lessons about how to manage their money.
I think guidance is very important. And also at the same time, you need to let them know how they can get the allowances. For example, you can use some your physical work to exchange for that money. For example, if you clean up your room and then you can get maybe $10. And from a very young age, they started to know earning money is not an easy thing. And they will be more frugal and stingy in terms of spending the money.
Yeah, well, look at you guys. You both seem to have it figured out. And, well, I think I'm pretty good at keeping a balance, but I'm really not good at all in terms of investment. And I think actually as an adult, you realize that's the really important part of your financial portfolio. That is how to make some smart investments, even if you have a tiny bit of money, and you might be able to put it to good use. And total disclosure here, my dad was so sweet. He was the one that said, "Oh, my dear, if you want money, just take it from my wallet." And I would recommend that to all parents if you would like to do that. That's it for today's Roundtable. We'll see you next time.